Yes, all right. So two-step factoring, this is just a quick review of some things that we did before spring break. So for instance, example number 1. If your directions just said factor, and that's kind of where we're headed. So on our next big test that we take, our directions are just going to say factor, and the problems are going to be all mixed up. Some will just be GCF, some will be grouping, some will be easy trinomials, some will be hard trinomials, and some will be something that we call differences of perfect squares. So I'm recording this. If you need to go back and look at an example or listen to an example, sometimes we do our notes, but we can't really tell what we wrote on our notes or what step came before the next. So if we are factoring something like 3x squared minus 24x plus 45, if the directions just say factor, okay, I want you to raise your right hand. Everybody raise your right hand, okay? And repeat after me. I solemnly swear.
I solemnly swear.
When I factor.
When I factor.
I will always try.
I will always try.
To factor out a GCF first. Okay. We'll do it again just for Braden.
I said it.
I solemnly swear.
I solemnly swear.
When I'm factoring.
When I'm factoring.
I will always try. To factor out a GCF first. Okay, if the directions say factor, thank you for swearing for that. If the GCF say factor, you're always going to check first to see if there's a GCF. It doesn't matter whether there's 2 terms, it doesn't matter whether there's 3 terms, it doesn't matter whether there's 4 terms or 10 terms. Is there a GCF among 3x squared, 24x, and 45? 3, okay? Dax says 3, and he is absolutely right. Why can I not include an x there, Toki?
Ma'am.
Why can I not include 3x?
It's not the great.
Why?
The x squared. Oh, because it already got a you talking about the x squared, right?
Why can 3x not be the GCF?
Because x not in every one of the
Awesome. That's what I wanted you to say. Okay, so just a 3. 3 times what is 3x squared?
x.
X squared. 3 times what is negative 24x? Negative 8x. And 3 times what is 45? Positive 15 or negative 15?
Positive 15.
Positive 15. All right. So remember, you just held up your right hand and you said, anytime that I'm factoring, I swear that I'm going to try to factor out the GCF first. Okay? You're going to try. Sometimes there's not going to be a GCF, but if there is, you want to do that in your very first step. And these are your notes, so you might want to write something like GCF. You always want to do that first, if there is one. Okay? Because once you factor out the GCF, the problem just might factor again. So you always want to get the GCF factored out first. So then let's look at what's left. So what's left is the x squared minus 8x plus 15. And that has 3 terms. And that is called a trinomial. And we know how to factor most trinomials. And this is a trinomial that we know how to factor because it has an x squared term, an x term, and what we call a constant term, which means a number without a variable. So we're going to attempt to factor this. What do we do with the GCF? We just bring it down. It's just hanging out. It doesn't go anywhere. Trinomials usually factor into 2 what? Binomials. To get that x squared, we need an x times an x, and then you make the decision about your signs. Is it plus plus, minus minus, plus minus? Minus minus. Anybody disagree with that? You may walk me through how I determine whether it's minus minus, Logan.
The first sign determines what goes down there, and the second time, if it's a plus, then that means the first sign, they both say the same. And if it's a minus, then it's different.
Okay, everybody get that? Anybody need me to go back over it? If the last term is positive, the signs are the same, and they're whatever
the last time
the middle sign is. If the last term is positive, 15 is the last term. If it's positive, the signs are the same. And those signs are whatever the middle sign is. If the last term is negative, then the signs are opposite. If the last term is negative, then the signs have to be different because the positive times the negative is going to give you a negative. And then you'll have to decide what's positive and what is negative. My next step is to either think or write down everything that multiplies to be 15. Am I looking for things that add to be negative 8 or subtract to be negative 8? Add, because the 15 is positive. You're looking for what adds, and that's going to be 3 and 5. Okay? So all we're doing here is taking something that we've already learned, and we just have 2 steps. That's why it's called, guess what? 2-step factoring. 2-step factoring. We factor that GCF out first, and then what's left is going to factor again. There's 2 steps. The first step is the GCF. The second step will be some other way that we learn how to factor. All right, you try example 2. You try example 2. Anytime the directions say factor, you're always going to check for a GCF. If there is a GCF, you will factor that out in your first step. There is a GCF, and y'all are going to try to do this one in either by yourself or in your group. I'm not going to work this one out. Do it yourself or ask people in your group if you're not sure what's going on. I'm going to freeze the screen, and I'm going to work it out while you're working it out. Okay. Shh. Some of y'all need to drop that talking and get to work.
Oh, it's 5 and 4. Wow. It's first left hand. Oh, we didn't know that. The quarter? See? I said word. I didn't say
Okay. I got a GCF of x. Once I factored out my GCF of x, I got x squared plus 9x plus 20, which was a trinomial. My little GCF just comes right down. It doesn't go away. And then I factor my trinomial into x plus 4 and x plus 5. If you wanted to, you could have had the x plus 5 first and the x plus 4 last. It won't matter there as long as you have an x plus 4 factor and you have an x plus 5. Any questions about example 2? How many of you got that one correct? Okay. All right, let's look at example 3. We have 5a to the fourth. This one's going to be a little bit harder. 5a to the fourth minus 25a to the third minus 30a squared. So we're really not doing anything that we haven't already done. This is just taking us 2 steps of what we already know how to do. It's just a 2-step problem, like take out the trash and put a new garbage bag in the garbage can. It's just 2 steps. Okay, some of y'all probably just do that first one and forget to put the garbage bag in the garbage can. All right, is there a GCF? 5a squared. Okay, this time I get to include an a because there is an a in every term. So 5a squared, if you don't factor out the greatest common factor, then nothing else is going to work for you here. So you got to spend some time thinking about the GCF. 5a squared times what is 5a to the fourth? A squared. Hey guys, I'm going to leave some of you behind. 5a squared times what is negative 25a cubed?
5a.
Negative or positive?
Negative.
Negative 5a. And 5a squared times what is negative 30a squared?
6a.
Negative 6 and no a.
Oh yeah, it's just negative 6.
Okay?
Wow.
Alright, now I'm left with a squared minus 5a minus 6, which is a trinomial. And our trinomials, we know how to factor those. So we bring our GCF down. It doesn't go anywhere. We're going to factor our trinomials into 2 what? Binomials. I've got to get an a squared. That's easy. I need an a times an a. Tell me about my signs.
It'll be different signs.
They've got to be different signs because that 6 is negative. So then I'm going to be either thinking or writing down things that multiply to be 6. And this time, since 6 is negative, you're looking for 2 things that multiply to be 6 that subtract to be 5.
Negative 2, no. It's negative 2 or 3.
Subtract to be 5. 3 and 2 subtract to be 1.
1 minus.
Okay? It's got to be 1 and 6. Okay? Multiply to be 6 and subtract to be 5. This time they have to be subtract to be 5. And not only do they have to subtract to be 5, but they have to subtract to be negative 5. So 1 would have to be positive. You're correct. And the 6 would have to be negative. All right, it's a little bit harder when the last term of your trinomial is negative. It's a little bit harder when the last term of your trinomial is negative. All right, let's do the next one together. Let's do the next one together because it's got a little weird thing going on. 2-step factoring. The first step is the GCF. The second step is we have something else that we know how to factor, and we're going to factor it. Anybody still copying example 3? All right, example 4. Negative 5b squared minus 25b plus 250. Negative 5b squared minus 25b plus 250. I wanted to show you this one because for the first time out of all 4 of the examples that we've looked at, the first term is negative. Okay? If your highest degree term, that's the one that has the highest exponent, if it is negative, then you want your GCF to be negative. Okay? So what's the GCF? We know it's going to be negative.
Negative 5.
Negative 5. Okay, now I'm going to explain to you when we factor out the negative 5 why you want the 5 to be negative, because I want that I want the b squared to be positive, because that's how we learn how to factor with that squared term, that first term of that trinomial being positive. So negative 5 is outside the parentheses, and then I have b squared, and then I have plus or minus 5b. Plus 5b. And then 250 is really big. 50. Ethan's right. 50. Plus 50 or minus 50?
I have a question.
Okay, what is your question?
Never mind.
Okay, yeah.
Did you have to do negative 5 or negative 5b too?
Okay. Now, anytime you factor out a negative, you've got to make sure you get your signs right. So let's go back and check this. Negative 5 times b squared. Does that give you this term?
Yes, ma'am.
negative 5 times positive 5b, does that give me negative 25b?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And then does negative 5 times negative 50 give me positive 250?
Okay.
Yes. Is your square term positive? Is your square term positive? Yeah. You want your b squared to be positive because our rules for factoring trinomials are all based on that b squared being positive. All right, we're just going to bring down the negative 5, and we're going to take that trinomial and we're going to factor it. I need to get a b squared. That's the easy part. That's going to be b times b. Tell me about my signs.
This is going to be negative. I mean, opposite.
They're going to be opposite or different, however you want to say that. So now I'm going to be thinking about or writing down everything that multiplies to be 50. 1 and 50, 2 and 25. And you may already think about it ahead of time before I get there. 5 and 10. Since 50 is negative, you're looking for two things that multiply to be 50 that subtract to be 5. And that's going to be 5 and 10. But you got to decide which one's positive and which one's negative. Positive what?
Positive 5.
10's positive. Dax is right like 99.9% of the time. Positive 10
Like me?
and negative 5. No, not like you, Toki.
Me and Dax think the same.
I might drop like 99.8.
I know, Logan. You're right like almost all the time when you're participating.
Pretty much. Yeah. When I try,
When you try. I have that on tape.
Really?
Okay. Now, that's all this was. Okay? This is just where there's a GCF first, and you factor it out, and then whatever's left, you factor it again. So that's really what we did before spring break. Okay? It's really what we did before spring break. I just didn't feel like we needed to waste our time doing a whole bunch of these. Everybody understand what we're doing here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop my recording.